You are great, yes, you are Holy One. Walked upon the sea, raised the dead. You reign in majesty, mighty God. Everything written about you is great. You are great, yes, you are Holy One. Walked upon the sea, raised the dead. You reign in majesty, mighty God. Everything written about you is great.
We're here for the dissertation defense of Canis Inyaka. He'll be defending his doctoral dissertation, which is titled Religion, Peace Building, and Human Security in Africa, a case study of Jos Plateau State in Nigeria. And before we get started, I want to introduce to you Dr. Dionalp, who's here in the graduate school. I've asked her to come and say a few words and just bring greetings on behalf of the graduate school.
Good afternoon. I'm just here to welcome you on behalf of our interim dean, Dr. Dana Williams, and our senior associate dean, Dr. Constance Ellison. I'd like to congratulate Mr. Canis Inyaka and also his advisor, Dr. Mohammed Kamara. I'd like to thank the committee chair, Dr. Halu, and committee members, Dr. Wilfred David and Dr. Christopher Johnson. I'd also like to give a special thanks to the outside advisor, Mr. Rocket Gorian. Thank you all so much, and good luck.
Thank you very much. So at this time, I should proceed. Okay, we're not going to wait. You can come in if he does. Okay. So I now declare this meeting of the Committee for the Final Oral Examination in Defense of the Dissertation to be in session. The candidate will stand, please. Thank you. Will the major advisor please present the candidate?
I'm happy to introduce Reverend Canis Inyaka, who has been with us for a few years now. I think by way of introducing him, I would like to say the strength and the value he brings can be testified by the audience here. I want to go into the details, but I know in the audience we have prominent people heading different organizations he has worked with, and other members who have worked with him. And Reverend Canis was a byproduct of Nigeria, and as you know, he's one of those who dedicated himself to the spiritual path. He's been an ordained priest for 18 years. He combines the secular and the spiritual world with his education. He has an MA in theology, public policy and administration, and conflict resolution and social justice, and BA in philosophy also. He has worked in different fields, both in the area and in his calling. In fact, we like to think he's one of those who represents what we want to do at Howard and African Studies, combining the intersections of engagement with the public and scholarship. And that's what he has done by putting together the intersections of the spiritual world in its engagement with the secular world of violence and conflict, with his case study in Jos area. He has done his work both as a scholar and as an ordained priest. Among the many things he has been involved in are his latest work, where he did work with his boss on global peace, a conference they organized in Korea. Another one 2 years before that in Uganda, among others that he has participated in and worldwide. And so his thesis is part of this effort to find ways how religion has become part of the world politics and world discourse, both interpreted negatively or in its positive ways. And that's how his research brings original insight and knowledge about what's going on in Nigeria as a case study and then for the world as a whole. So I'm happy to introduce him.
Thank you. Not yet. Not just yet. Sorry, I have a few more words. Thank you for the introduction. I will now introduce the other members of the committee. Professor Muhammad Kamara serves on the committee, Professor Wilfred David on the committee. I'm Krista Johnson. His Kindness's advisor is Professor Alam Hailu, all from the Department of African Studies. And our external examiner today is Professor Chak Gregorian from American University. Let me also ask if you wanted to, because I didn't do this before, if you wanted to introduce anyone or just acknowledge or say a thank you before you begin.
Yes.
And then let me hold off on that. I'll give you an opportunity to do that, but let me maybe finish what I have to say first. So the candidate of the degree of Doctor of Philosophy is required to present a dissertation, which is the result of significant and sustained research in his or her major field. The student must demonstrate ability to organize and present effectively the findings of his or her research. When completed, it is expected that such research will make a meaningful contribution to knowledge. So quickly I'll go through the outline, and then perhaps before you begin, if you would just acknowledge, if there are people that you want to thank and acknowledge in the room. So the candidate will summarize your dissertation, and I'll give you 20 minutes, okay? No more than 20 minutes. And then we will have an initial round of questions from your committee members, followed by a second round of questions from the committee members. And then we will offer an opportunity for your guests and audience to ask some questions or comments if they have any. Then you and the audience will be excused, and the committee will be able to deliberate, and then bring you back in for to make our decision. So that's the kind of process that we'll follow for today. I'll turn it over to you and look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you so much for being here today to witness the oral defense of my dissertation. I want to sincerely thank the members of my dissertation committee. Let me start with the chair of the committee, Dr. Johnson, who is also the director of the department. For all your support, Dr. Johnson, for the many ways you try to work for the good of the students. You search for great opportunities that will help students advance their stay in this department. Thank you so much. Dr. David, your introduction of the humanitarian development paradigm has set positive waves around the world. Students who pass through this department have always said that it is something we need today in the understanding of what development should be, that it should be human-centered, not just something about the GDP. So thank you so much for all your support and for transforming our intellectual strength. Dr. Kamara, you are also the chair of the department. As soon as you came into this department, you embraced both students and faculty, and you have always tried to advance the work of your predecessors. Thank you, Dr. Kamara. And the visiting professor, the external examiner, Dr. Gregorian, thank you so much for accepting to do this work. Thanks for your presence. Thanks for reading the material and coming here today to help work through this process. And I'll turn to my advisor, Dr. Hailu. Dr. Hailu is not just a professor, a teacher. He is a mentor. He's a brother. And has always guided me through this process. Dr. Hailu, I sincerely thank you from my heart. I want to recognize some individuals in this room. First of all, we recognize that a work like this cannot ordinarily be the effort of one person. Many people in different fields of life supported me to come to this point. I want to recognize the chair of the board of Alliance for Peace Building International, an organization that connects more than 100 international organizations on peace building and development. Bob Berg. Bob, thank you for coming here to support me today. I want to recognize the international president of Global Peace Foundation, where I work as a development specialist, Jim Flynn, and Alan Eman, who is also the advisor of the organization, and my direct boss, Gail Hableton. Gail, thank you very much. Let me recognize my sister, Sister Joanne, who has always guided me in different ways. Sister Joanne was with the Catholic Bishops' Conference of the United States. I want to thank Dr. Cosmos Wokafor, Dr. Ephraim Okoro, Dr. Susie Okoro, who are very close friends and people from my area. My in-law is here. They thank you so much for coming. And Dr. Obon, my very close friends in the program, Texfire and Ayo. I want to recognize my very good friend, June, and the daughter and the friend, Toby, for being here today. And finally, my sister, who took care of me for 2 months when I moved from Colorado to this place, is here today. IJ, thank you very much. When I moved from Colorado, she took care of me for 2 months before I moved into the parish. I am eternally grateful to you. Let me now move to what brought me to this research. As most of you know, I am a Catholic priest who has dedicated my life to the building of peace and human dignity all over the world. And one of the powerful messages of Jesus Christ is life. In John chapter 10, verse 10, he said, I came that you may have life and have it abundantly. And this life is all inclusive. As a priest who has always promoted human dignity and human security, I reflected on the common ground between all religions, what they share, what they hold together, their universal values. And in 2016, I visited Jos Plateau State. I saw a discrepancy between what is said about religion outside, the way religion is portrayed as the cause of violence, the cause of conflict, and what different religious institutions and organizations were doing in Jos to promote peace and human security. That urged me to go into a deeper research to bring out the role of religion in peace building and human security, not only in Jos Plateau State, but across the board, because what we see in Jos Plateau State, Nigeria, is also applicable in different parts of Africa. So that was the starting point of this journey in 2016 that culminated in the production of this study. And one of the questions is, why religion? It's very important. In the first place, the spiritual message of religion on peace, forgiveness, reconciliation, some of the shared values of different cultures and societies, including Jos and Nigeria. And this is something every community should embrace. Secondly, the very goals of human security, which promotes equity, justice, social development, and economic development, are not only compatible with the precepts, the teachings of religion, they are also materials for building peace in Jos Plateau State. And at this point, I want to paraphrase the words of Madeleine Albright in 2006. She said that religious bodies collectively have the resources, the personnel, the dedication, the commitment to build peace and development, to build reconciliation more than any government in the world. And that's a woman as a diplomat who worked in different parts of the world. So looking at the statement of the problem, I looked at the conflict of identity caused by colonialism in different parts of Africa, how these moved different societies to identity, loyalty, and closeness. We created division, and Jos Plateau State got its own share in 1915 when the mining industry was established in Jos Plateau State. The House of Fulani, who moved to be part of that industry, tried to gain upper hand in the industry, neglecting and diminishing the presence of the indigenes, and that was the starting point of conflict in Jos Plateau State. And then this continued to grow in different forms till the early 2001. Okay. Back a bit, please. Okay, good. So you look at these pictures and the timeline. In 1934, there was a conflict, communal conflict. There was another one in 1966, and things became very calm, and that was why Jos was called the home of tourism and peace. But at the dawn of the third millennium, things started changing because of this force of identity. That in 2001, in Jos crisis, more than 3,000 people were killed. In September, between September 2001 and 2004, 5,000 people died, and more than 4,000 people died in 2004 ethnic clashes. So that's the background of this study. So the research then went into understanding, because sometimes, as Upengu pointed out, the conflict in Jos is always given a religious garb, and that distracts from the main issues, the underlying issues. So the research went into understanding the role of religion in peace building and human security, to examine how religion can and has advanced sustainable peace and human security in Jos, and also to understand other drivers of conflict, so that when you are approaching a path to solution, you will understand the true problems. If religion is focused on, it could distract from the main problems, and it highlights the positive role of religion in rebuilding relationship. So the three questions that guided the research are: how does religion play a role in peace building and human security? How does religion influence the onset and the dynamics of conflict and its resolution? And the third one is, how does conflict impact human security in Jos? After formulating these questions, we tried to look at the thesis. The thesis of this research is that religion plays a significant role in peace building and human security, with the two hypotheses. Number one, religion rightly and correctly adopted in enabling groups and communities live up to the ideals of upholding human freedom can maintain peace and human security. And the second hypothesis is very important, that a conflict in Jos area is also associated with the negative application and implication of religious precepts and ideals, as we also notice in different parts of the world today. So dealing with these two opposites, we tried also to look at literature on what other scholars have said about this issue of peace building and human security. The first aspect of our literature review was the model of economic that was promoted in liberal economic polity that the foundation of peace in the world is liberal and free market economy. If we have it, there will be peace. And then the democratic reconstructionism. This model has guided international response in different parts of the world stricken by conflict. And they think that it's about election and democracy. If we have it, there's no problem. The secularization theory following the modernization theory argue that religion is dead. It's of no use. It has nothing to do with human well-being and should be thrown away. And then we move to the humanitarian development paradigm of our own dear Professor David, which also connects with the ideals of religious values. According to Dr. David, the humanitarian paradigm focuses on enhancing human development potentials through a dialogue that is anchored in the core human values, basic rights, global justice, cosmopolitan standards, and the expansion of the freedom of people. So that is a very important aspect of understanding the meaning of peace and human security and social cohesion. The Commission for Human Security says that for prevention of violence, there must be a way to deal with social inequalities that confront all peoples. And according to Mahbub Ukaik, in 1995, he said, the major concern of human security is not to stockpile weapons, which is a competition all over the world today, who has the greatest weapon of mass destruction. But he said the human security has to be interested in how to safeguard and promote human dignity as the foundation. And according to Mustafa in 2005, the spirit of universal unity that exists in religions is the potential of the power of peace. The understanding, just as John Paul II pointed out in one of his greatest words, Crossing the Threshold of Hope, that all humans have the same root, and that when we recognize that we have the same root, we can work for peace and human security. So we try to organize this within the framework of the theories of change. The theories of change say that the development of certain programs and interventions can bring about a certain change. And the scholar we used his theory of change in this research is John Paul Lederach. John Paul Lederach said it is constructive change. The conflict happening in the human society, it's about relationship. When there is good relationship, you can transform conflict from destructive conflict to constructive conflict that brings change. And it boils down to relationship, the power of relationship that will change perception, that will change attitude, and see humanity as one. The methodology we used, the research used the qualitative method which engage the human person in his real life experience, not the statistical measurement of human experiences, speaking to people, talking to them, seeing their countenance, their frame of mind, their reaction, their posture, all these come into play in the research. And the research design was case study because we focused in a particular geographic location, just Plateau State. The primary data were collected from observations, unofficial interactions, public meetings, and conferences. And the secondary data came from review of documents, government documents, newspapers, and documents from other institutions. The data we properly read, reread, analyzed, coded, and the teams we sift out to form the findings and the discussion part of the research. One of the major findings is the role of religion in conflict prevention. And as I said when I was presenting the thesis and hypothesis, is always a challenge the human society faces and the way out. When religion is properly used, as Appleby pointed out in 2000, that the wellspring of these values can transform the human society, as has happened in different parts of the world. In Mozambique, San Egidio helped to build peace. Currently, CRS has been in Colombia and other parts of South America for years. And of course, my own organization, Global Peace Foundation, is doing a great job in Kaduna presently, which is one of the models that the world is embracing in community peace building. But the other side of it is to look at the misuse of religion, where groups like ISIS will tell you, we are representing Islam. But Islam in itself means peace. And these groups use the name of Islam to kill, to destroy. Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, it's a challenge to the human society. How do we use the principles of religion against the misuse of these precepts and principles? One of the speakers in one of the communities said, we trust the religious leaders more than the government. And that is why the government effort to make peace does not work. We need the religious leaders to lead the line because they know our pain. They live with us. What is called the ubiquitous presence of religion. They are there with us. They know what we suffer. And one of the examples that was given was a time a market was to be burnt. And the religious leaders of all leanings came together and stopped that. With that networking of preventive approach, the religious leaders have always helped. But in 2014, Boko Haram bombed some churches. And that's the conflict again. So it's always about advancing the values of religious teachings, the values of these traditions, religion and peace education. Let me quote directly from a young man, a university student. I was touched to see an imam in my church speaking of our oneness and the need to see conflict and violence as the common enemy. That presence of religious leaders in the communities moving together to talk about our roots, our heritage, our oneness, helped to build peace. And a woman who said in one of the meetings, I owe the nutritional well-being of my children to the kind heart of a Muslim community, no religion, no ethnicity, about humanity, the human security issue. They fed her and her children, not asking her, what church do you go to? What type of religion do you practice? It's about a human person in need, and that transcends. But the most important aspect of this finding is religion and the transformation of human conscience and morality. You can see young people coming together after one of the strikes to clean the place, to move around, to console people, to bring healing to communities. And they said, what is taught in church and mosque have shaped our consciences and reduced the desire for conflict and violence, and increased the passion to see and respect every person as the image of God to be protected. These are young people. It's one of the ways religion can transform the human society and build peace. If we enter the space of the younger generation using the precepts of religion. And the misuse of these teachings, as I pointed out, one of the speakers said, he was talking about politicians. When they loot and share money in Abuja, Abuja is the capital of Nigeria, they don't remember religious differences. But when they fail to get their way and what they want, they come back to us and tell us that it is because they are Muslim or Christian. They use religion when things do not go their way. They want us to fight. They want us to kill each other. That is the time religion is used. But when they are there in Abuja looting and carrying money away, that's no problem. We are one Nigeria. But the moment somebody loses out, They did it to me because I'm a Muslim, and the Muslims will fight Christians, distracting from the main issues. On the discussion part, looking at the two hypotheses which the study supported, the discussion part, religion is a true tool for social cohesion and peace. As we can see, the bishop, the man in different times, working for peace, moving to communities, preaching oneness, the respect for human dignity and oneness, and the imperative of human security. That connects again to the humanitarian development paradigm of Dr. David, that if we really want to deal with issues of conflict, we have to fall back to religious values to build human security. The structures are there. From every aspect of religious organizations structure, we can build human security. These religious institutions and organizations have built schools, they built hospitals, they provided a business for poor people, and those are the things we can do to move towards peace. Because if we say, oh, we want to start, end it at the first value of abstract talking about peace without dealing with the concrete issues, as Dr. David pointed out, then we come back to the same problem every time. And the appropriation of religion in politics is one of the challenges we saw in JOS. When, like in 1998, when Babangida created JOS North local government, most people saw it as a political game, and that created a whole lot of problems. So it is important to see when politicians are coming to manipulate religious ideals, and then the religious leaders and communities to say no to that. But it goes with peace education to teach people to understand. And in conclusion, both the review and the findings of this study confirmed the thesis that religion plays a significant role in peace building and human security in JOS, Nigeria, and the global community. Religion and religious resources as lived identity and experience in JOS were shown in the findings to be advanced in conflict prevention and transformation, the rebuilding of relationships and promotion of goals of human security, and when they were not properly used, were real tools for conflict. Lessons and insight from this research. This study seeks to show religious and spiritual universal values as a nexus for peace building and human security. Both the goals of peace building and human security are best served and guided by the universal principles of which religious and spiritual communities in conflict prevention and human development have served communities over the centuries. The implication for further research. What I would like to do in future is to engage in what I call the research of peace for the streets, synthesizing the religious teachings of different traditions and see how these can apply to the lives in the streets. And when I talk about the streets here, I include the Congress of Nigeria as a street, where people should know the impact of these values. My recommendations are these, that local peace and reconciliation structures with a demographic representation in JOS is very important. Peace education in our schools is very important today, from the kindergarten. A more organic approach to peace building against the parachute traditional structure that has not helped communities to deal with conflict is very important. And then a reintegration and rehabilitation of the fighters from different groups as human beings who need to be redeemed socially. Resources should be allocated to peace building programs. The herdsmen and farmers crisis in JOS should not be treated as a political game. It should be seen as a problem of humanity caused by climate change, caused by meager resources, caused by shrinking resources. And how can we help these two groups to live and have their earning and peace instead of using it as a political issue? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kanis. We're going to begin with a round of questions, and it's We typically begin with our external examiner, actually, if you don't mind, or is that putting you on the spot?
Well, I don't know where to start. I've never been at a defense where there were 25 people in the audience. And a cameraman and distinguished colleagues and such. But thank you, and thank you for inviting me to this event. I guess first of all, I very much enjoyed the dissertation. It reminds me of conversations we had when we were in class together, that graduate course I taught. I thought that the literature that you drew on, particularly the literature that I'm familiar with, from Mark Juergensmeyer to Gopin and John Paul Literak and all, is the appropriate literature for this. And I thought that the chapters were nicely laid out, and I thought that you were absolutely right in terms of the causes of conflict, that conflicts may be religion-based, but they're not religious conflicts. And I think this is a message that we need to get across as often as possible. And you did a very good job of demonstrating the factors in JOS, economic, political, and other, which were really the source of the conflict, and how religion was used by so-called conflict entrepreneurs to manipulate the masses. One question I had is, you very early mentioned the importance of women and youth. And I was curious what happened to women in the process of your thinking, because I think women, we are finding increasingly in the literature on peace building how important women's roles are. I wondered why you weren't a little more explicit. I mean, this is one question. Why you weren't more explicit? Does this have anything to do with anything I don't know?
Patriarchy? No, Prof. Thank you for that observation. Actually, I mentioned women where they use the marketplace to build peace and to impart the conversation on peace in the 5th chapter of the work. So, and you know, again, I mentioned a woman in the findings who said, my experience, my children are dying. You know, this Muslim community helped me. So we know very well that in conflict situations, women are the most impacted victims, and their voice should be heard in the peace process. We can have a good peace process where only men come around the table when women suffer. They are the ones whose husbands are killed, their sons and daughters are killed, their sons are killed, their daughters are raped, they themselves are raped sometimes, and all this burden on them. So thank you for that observation.
You can ask another question now, or we will go around and give you an opportunity to ask again.
It's just an observation.
Yes,
You've said what I wanted to hear in the work. I think if it could be, if that could be fleshed out a little bit in terms of women's role, not as victims, but as women's agency and their importance in peace building. I think that's very important when we're talking particularly about the issue of religion, because there are critics who would say that religious actors have sometimes been repressing women and not allowing them to have that voice.
Thank you very
much. In that
much.
context.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks.
Dr. Kumar, ask you.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Nyaka. I very much enjoyed reading your dissertation.
Thank you.
And I recall some of it from your proposal and your defense, the very lively conversation that the committee and you had there. And I think you did an excellent work and took into account the positive and constructive criticism that you received from the committee at the proposal defense.
Thank you.
That having been said, I would like to ask you a question on the relations between African self-perception and Western categorization of our identities. On page 22nd, you talk about 54 of these, meaning the ethnicities. 54 of these are from Plateau State, where Bantu and Kwa subfamilies of the Benue, Congo, and the Chadic subgroup of the Nilo-Saharan or Afro-Asiatic families. As an African, I sometimes wonder, how has Western anthropological categorization of our identity that pre-existed any kind of anthropology, how has that penetrated our self-perceptions and our perceptions of one another? When I, in full interest of full disclosure, I'm half Fulani. And I have been almost deafened by hearing my mother and her relatives proclaiming that they're not black. That Fulanis are sometimes from Arabs, and then from Jews, and at a certain point, I sitting there with my mom and uncle, I said, okay, you make up your mind. Are you Arab or Jewish? Of course, they wouldn't go as far as to say, yeah, we are Semites. So, because both are. However, more seriously, it's I am concerned when I see these. This is not a criticism of what you put here, but from your study of Jos, which is very culturally and ethnically diverse and religious, are people, at least the elite of these groups, self-aware in the sense that some might consider themselves as Asiatic or some whatever comes from the Western literature, even though you and I know, or at least we strongly believe, they are 150% African.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you for that question. One of the ways to look at this is what Frank Fanon talked about, emancipation, mental emancipation. I think it's one of the issues we struggle with as Africans, the way we've been programmed, using the words of Dr. David again, we've been programmed to think in a certain way. And because of cross-cultural interaction, from slavery to colonialism to the 21st century interaction, mixed bloods come, and those who think they are closer to the Western skin, racial differential, think they are more superior. It's one of the issues we deal with in the Niger Delta area. You see people who answer Dixon, Brown, this, that. When you meet them, even though they are darker than me, they want to tell you, I'm not from here. So I think it's a struggle, and that's where scholars, African scholars, should do a more serious work to help to dig and emancipate. Is a problem, and it also plays into the conflict issue. So I noticed it in Jos, and I think that scholarship need to do more in that area.
Another question?
You may.
Oh, okay, thank you. And also, Jos, you say several times, and I appreciate that, it's essential. There is this convoluted representation of what conflicts or the sources of conflict may be at Jos. On one level, we get the impression from the people who promote those differentiations that it is about identity, us versus the other, the otherization of whoever the other happens to be. But also on another level, and you emphasize this, it's about land ownership. My question to you is, do you think it is essentially about land ownership in terms of real estate, or is it about rulership? Regardless of who owns the piece to the north, the piece to the west, who is empowered to rule this territory, because that who is supposed to be the indigenous collectivity for here. Is it just owning land, or is it for the entitlement to ruling the territory?
Yeah, thank you again, Prof. I think they're all connected. We cannot have a reductionist approach to the problem in Jos as, oh, it's this simple issue that is causing it. Because going back to history again, when the House of Fulani moved, by the way, in the 19th century during the jihad, the indigenous people, the Baram, the Afizere, and the Anaguta, BAA they call them, resisted the jihadists, and they tried to rule their own environment, and they gave land to these people when they came in. So it came to a point with the establishment of the mining industry in Jos, the House of Fulani were the first to move in, and these people this is from historical documents, gave them their land. And the House of Fulani had their own leader coming from the influence of the Caliphate and their relationship with the West. And they have their own Bongon Jos, which was something traditional to the indigenous people. So you have a connection of land and rulership. And it comes back to who owns the land. So when they say who owns the land, it's not just about the estate, it's also about rulership. Who should be the ruler in this community? And that affected and influenced, from historical documents again, the creation of Jos North in 1998, because the House of Fulani wanted a part of Jos to themselves alone. And the creation of Jos North gave them that opportunity. And that caused real crisis. Again, people will go back to, oh, it's religion. But there were underlying factors. So in essence, we have variables.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've had the discussion so many times. I want to ask you two questions, and they both piggyback on what the issue to other professors picked. One has to do with the question of women, or let me put it this way, it has to do with the role of, to use a big concept, hegemonic masculinity. What causes the conflict in Africa from time? What has caused conflict from time immemorial? And today and in the world, it has been the subservience of women, especially in the case of ownership rights,
yes,
and exchange entitlements. In terms of Dr. Kumar, that women have been denied their ownership rights in terms of land and resources, generally, and especially in Nigeria. This has been well known and well documented. their exchange entitlements have been denied, in the sense that they don't have jobs, or when they have jobs, they're not paid equal to men. So women's freedom have been denied. So we could say then that hegemonic masculinity or the denial of women's rights and so on is at the forefront of conflict resolution, and therefore, following the brother, the discussion of women's rights should be centered to the discussion of conflict. In Nigeria, don't you agree?
I agree, Prof.
Yeah.
It's very important.
I thought, well, you ought to put in something there,
Yes, yeah.
To that effect.
Yeah, it's properly noted.
Well, maybe, the things you discuss here, but you couldn't deal with that issue, but it's very important. All right.
Thank you.
That's one thing.
Okay.
The second thing has to do with religion and ethnicity.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Now, in Nigeria, you can't have a middle class consensus, economists call it, because of ethnic strife. We know that that is well known and so on. But let me ask the question this way. I grew up as a Christian, as an Episcopalian, an Anglican, not by choice. I had British colonialism, like Nigeria. I grew up having to go to church.
Yes.
Right? In a colony.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to England when I was 18. I was 18 years, went to the University of London, and I had to go to church every Sunday. So I went to church the first 3 Sundays, and nobody said a thing to me. No, it's in London.
Yeah.
The priest didn't say anything to me. High church and the no member of the congregation came and said, "Well, how are you? Where are you from?" And I stopped going to church. I stopped going to church until I was very old. Right?
Yeah.
Right? So I had an alienated experience in terms of the church and what it offered me.
Yeah.
Right? All right. I'm putting that because you see, as in most colonies, the Anglican Church, your church there, the Roman Catholic Church, and all these and so on, were there, and I often wondered to what extent the values of the church, which is really a foreign church in Nigeria or in Guyana or in Trinidad, right, really reflect the local values or what the people think ought to be equity, ought to be rights, and so on. So, the question then, has to do, if we talk about humanitarian development, which is pure, which it says you must have equity,
justice,
justice, and so on, right, and so on. But then in its practice, the very church, whether it be the Catholic Church or the Anglican Church, you know, it doesn't practice it.
Okay.
I mean, it's a problem which I've had, you know.
Oh, yeah, Prof. It's a great point. It's a great point. I appreciate it. Even as a priest, when I first came to the United States, that was in Colorado, I celebrated Mass the first evening.
Yeah.
One guy came to me after Mass and said, "We don't need you here. We don't understand you."
Yeah.
He came out from the same church that I celebrated.
Yeah.
But he told me, "We don't need you here. We don't understand you." Again, that's why this study is important. When do we use the ideals, the values of religion? And when do we refuse to use them? It doesn't matter who is doing it.
Right.
The Pope, the Imam, the monk. These values are eternal, they are universal, they are connected to the natural law. For instance, the sanctity of life is a value that is in all cultures, including Igbo land. In my culture, you don't shed blood because of the idea of the sanctity of life. So when somebody is misusing this value, then something has to happen in order to teach people this is not the ideal. Just like when an ISIS representative goes to Bombay Church in the name of Islam. That's not what Islam told him to do, and we cannot put it on Islam. And that's why my study is to find out these ideals. How can we use them to transform relationship, to build peace? But I acknowledge that even among religious leaders, these values have been misused.
Well, let me see. Another question for that. Can Nigeria be saved?
Prof. I remember when you taught us the 1980 plan of action that was rejected by the Western power, right?
Yes.
Nigeria is redeemable, but it has to be organic.
Right.
And there has to be cooperation. You know, you also taught us corporate social responsibility.
Right.
When these people go to Niger Delta and destroy the vegetation, the land and everything, there has to be a cooperation in action based on humanitarian development paradigm.
All right.
We'll leave it there for now. For now. Let me ask a couple of questions. I had a question with regards to gender.
Oh, wow.
It's important, and
it is.
And instead of me saying that, let me also just highlight. I don't know if I was the only one who observed this, but you know, in several occasions, you use the term mankind is confronted by issues of conflict. I think that needs to be fixed because it goes again to this issue. So
thank you, Prof. Thank you.
Every time I'm like, no,
thank you, Dr. Johnson.
You can't talk about humanity and all the rest of that and say mankind.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson.
Okay. So, and I think they've hampered pushed the other issues.
Okay.
And so I won't go into that anymore. Let me ask my question with regards to. Then I guess it's the other side of me, which I liked. I liked your data section. I like to hear the quotes. I enjoy all of that, and it really adds to the richness of your dissertation, very much so. And then I had some questions, though. I mean, some of them maybe I'll start with those, or just really. About the research process, a little bit more about your research process, because I mean, just from other conversations, it was quite clear that this was not an ideal kind of research setting, obviously, for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
And so you talked about not being able to do formal interviews, so you're doing kind of really informal conversations. But there are limitations to that, right?
Yes,
so
sure.
I mean, kind of. But could you also just give me a sense? And there was a lot of also just kind of participant observation, walking around, and then the meetings, of course. And there seems to be quite a lot of meetings. Yeah, I mean, just like with the informal conversations, I mean, can you give me a sense again how you put that together, and where some of these, some of the quotes I know were coming from the meetings, but the ones that were informal conversations.
Yeah, the ones that were informal conversations, I spent time in the place, and of course, because of the crisis, I couldn't get into formal structured interview because somebody can bomb you there, So I try to use sports in open places to interact with people, school settings, stores, marketplaces. If you know our country, you can have these spots where even people drink. You walk in and you start a conversation because of the issue of the moment in the area, and you pick information from them. That's how I patterned that aspect of informal interaction with people in different spots. But the meetings were properly designated. We knew where to attend these public meetings, and the people coming for this meeting, what they were intending to discuss, and that helped to pick their voices. So that's how I combine the informal interaction, because it's kind of it was the best way to approach issues at that time. Yeah.
And so in general, though, I mean, it's obviously this is on a lot of people's minds. So people were somewhat open to having public conversations obviously about this in person and kind of voicing their
I remember I entered what we call bar in Nigeria, maybe different from what you have here. Young guys were drinking. I walked in. I love street approach to picking information. I enjoy it so much. So I walked in, bought my own beer. We started conversation, because it's a problem. In fact, one day, that was on a Friday, they told me, hey, we need to leave this place until the mosques close, because we don't know what happens after. And that created some fear in the environment. And these young people, I remember one young man telling me, I have a Muslim friend, but sometimes I'm afraid of visiting him. He will not do anything to me, but I don't know what will happen to me in that environment. With that type of conversation, a lot of things come out. You pick what you want to pick, because that's what I use to connect with triangulation. Okay, this is a pattern in the area. Yeah.
Interesting. And just, I'm curious. So I also had a question with regards to your role as the researcher. So, like in settings such as that, you go into a bar and you buy yourself a beer and you sit down. Are people aware that you are yourself a researcher and or a reverend?
No. Some knew I was a reverend.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you would typically introduce yourself
the
as
introduction,
reverend.
yes,
Okay.
I did.
Okay.
But they didn't know I was a researcher, but some knew I was a Catholic priest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when I had an interaction with Muslim leaders, they knew I was a priest, and they were very happy.
Yeah.
We were talking about our shared values, and they were very, very happy that, we can stay and talk about these things, because it's our common problem. Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay. So back to your research question and your hypotheses.
Yeah.
So you outline here and then in the dissertation 3 research questions, and it's I don't even have the page, but it's how does religion
Okay. So,
yeah, no, you can say it. Well,
okay.
You know them better
the
than
first
I do.
one is, how does religion play a role in peace building and human
Yes,
security?
yes.
The second one is, how does religion influence the onset and the dynamics of conflict.
Yeah.
The third is the impact of this on human security.
Yes.
Those are the three questions.
Yeah. And then your hypotheses are more laid out as though the questions that they, or the thesis, you know, that they're answering are more kind of yes or, and no, because that, or at least up here, when you laid it out, it just seemed as though, yes, that it does influence. But I want to push you a little bit more on the how does it influence. Because it seems like, I mean, again, in reading like a lot of the quotes that I like and kind of pulling that out, and even what you're saying, I think, and then I'm trying to also tie this to how you're tying this to this, the theory of change. The focus is largely on this idea of changing of perceptions and attitudes,
Sure.
right? The
Sure.
religion's ability to kind of conscientize people in a certain way. Is that right?
Yes.
So then I'm curious, you know, again, like, you know, so you laid out the theory of change, which does seem, you know, quite appropriate. But I'm just curious, what are the lessons for that? Because it seemed as though, I mean, when you laid it out, you know, it's not really a typology, right? You know, so that, you know, there's this. People use it or kind of, you know, have kind of shaped that theory in different ways, right? So some talk about you have, you know, a list of, you know, kind of different ways. So some of it is kind of individual, you know, kind of perceptions or attitudes, behavior. Other is, you know, other, you know, kind of forms of change. How do you see your research, you know, kind of really informing and also really, I think, maybe narrowing, or certainly at least clarifying the you know, a kind of a theoretical framework of change?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
That we could then, you know, kind of build on as we move forward.
Yeah. When I presented the lessons learned, Prof, I'm sorry, please, can you help me go up a bit?
There we go.
Okay, come back here. Lessons.
Okay, yes.
Religious communities are key to rebuilding trust, reconciliation, and inclusion.
Okay.
And that's an attitude perception issue, especially when these communities, as I pointed out in the findings, that had conflict, the religious leaders moved in, brought the two groups together, they dialogued, there was forgiveness and reconciliation. That was a theory of change operationalized, because that helped them to recognize, yeah, we have conflict, but we don't want to kill ourselves. Let's move on from here. And the theory of change also was operationalized when I showed the picture of youths coming together after conflict, coming from their religious values. These were Muslim youths, Christian youths, and even traditional religion adherents coming together to say, this is not about Muslim, Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba. It's about humanity. It's about the destruction of our community. Let's come together and change things, because they were taught, and one of the young people said, this is a result of what we had in the mosque and the church. That's theory of change in action.
Okay. Let me leave it there for now. Oh.
I would put it in the same thing in terms of religion being an intermediate variable, a dependent variable, an independent variable of development. In other words, religion contributes to development in terms of its impact on value change.
Yes.
It's being used in churches or mosques and so on, being transmitted in that way as an intermediate variable, like culture.
Yes.
And then religion being a dependent variable itself in the conversation of development. It's really the same thing, but I think it lends more clarity, well, in terms of the methodology.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Prof.
Professor Hailu?
Okay.
And then I'll...
Okay. First, I would like to express my appreciation of the great insights and points raised by the committee members. Starting with our external examiner, he sparked the debate. In fact, it was followed by the others. the centrality of women in conflicts, as he correctly pointed out, not only as victims, which is true, they're the number one victims, and children, they bear the high cost of conflict and violence, but in terms of assigning them the authority to prevent conflicts, to resolve conflicts, institutionalizing them, that's a very important point raised. This was reflected by Dr. Kamara, connecting it to both perception, how subjective perceptions and external perceptions can distort the problems, how it's important to understand, to make sure that people develop their answers from the realities around them rather than the way they're perceived by outside image. And then Dr. David mirroring the denial of women's rights as one of the key explanatory variables for conflicts and how it should proceed in immaculate rotation. And Dr. Jansen's point also echoing that and also showing the value of the internal conversations, both how you separate the typology of the research when you focus on individual reactions, how you make sure that you connect it with a larger one, and that's a very delicate thing because it sometimes might miss. And the way I think she suggested that, and he answered correctly, is to develop both the multiple sources of the questions and answers and put it in the larger context so that the suggestions developed by showing how a holistic perspective should be taken to address this is very important. And by way of reinforcing what has been said, I always find it interesting when the theme about women was emphasized, underscored, because one of the things we appreciate, for instance, the Asian miracle, is how women played a big role in the development, how their nurturing of the children was one of the basis for the Asian development model. His concept of conflict starts there, where the values of masculinity, values of peace, values of inclusion can be inculcated there at the family level, at the regional level, and at the global level. So I want to just again say my appreciation for the comments done, because the reason that the medieval university started the open defense is an occasion for both transparency, but also for the opportunity to learn. I always learn whether I come as an advisor or as a member of committee, from the other committee members, from the presenter, and even from the audience. So I have taken notes. We'll integrate that in the revisions that might be needed.
Thank you. We'll have the opportunity for another. If anyone has, any of the committee members have additional questions or comments.
Yeah, not questions so much as comments. I enjoy that kind of sociological approach that you took, Anis, of observing and conversing and immersing. You were immersed in the community. But I think there could be some criticism of it being too soft on methodology. That you become part of the thing as opposed to apart from it. Letting your interlocutors speak for the positive impact of religion is one thing, but you have to make that case in your own words too. In other words, based on what they said to me, this is what I conclude.
Sure.
Because so far, much of what I've read, and I've read every word of this, and by the way, I've got to talk to you about some typos and stuff.
That's
That's not important at all. It's not substantive. I think some of the recommendations or some of the observations about the positive role are more aspirational, and I share your aspiration. I think religion can, but I'm not seeing enough of that reflected in the data that was garnered.
And that's on recommendations, right?
Right.
Thank you.
Right. What can the data? Let me put it to you this way: between you and me, this is fine. But if you're going to go and publish this, or think of publishing it, I think you would have to ratchet up some of the methodology to make it publishable. And we can talk about how you go about doing that. It's not to say that for the purposes of what you did here, it's not sufficient. It is. But beyond that, in terms of formal social science methodology, I think that needs to be boosted a little bit.
All right.
That's
Thank
my
you.
observation, not question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Professor Kamara?
Yeah, I have, with your permission, I have one observation and perhaps a question. The first observation is that when you talk about religion as a tool, if you will, or framework of peace building, most of what I see here is a top-down approach. It's essentially going from religious leaders and so on, hoping that it will trickle down to the population and transforming the population, the congregates from different areas, Muslim, Christian, traditional, somehow to absorb these teachings and become architects of peace. I wonder if that is not highly aspirational in this sense. And I would recommend that you look at the bottom-up approach also. How can we build a bottom-up approach to peace building, religion and peace building? You mentioned the reactions of individual young people, individual women after some kind of violent event, how individually they express their gratitude to people from another religious community, helping them and so on. I would like also to recommend that you discuss that a little bit further to show how the individual conscience of these people, regardless of their ethnicity, regional origin, religious identity, how this challenge, this experience brings out the reality of their humanism. Recognizing that, yes, I was the first people who came to my, to help me weren't necessarily my
co-religionists.
Yes, but people, Nigerians, period. But from there to the mass psychology, when these people or some of them find themselves back into the collective psychological predetermination, will they be thinking the same way? So how do we balance these two? The humanism of the individual Nigerian men, women, elderly, and youth on the one hand, and the mass psychology of the Christian, Muslim, and so on. How do we balance that? And that leads me to saying, following up on very quickly on what Dr. David said earlier about Christianity and the disconnect between colonial Christianity and the colonized Christianity. I would echo that in terms of Islam. And I think it's even more complicated. I wouldn't go as far as to say it's worse, because I don't know what I'm talking about then. But it's more complicated in the sense that Muslims, African Muslims, weren't colonized by Middle Eastern Muslims in the context of Europe and Africa, but were they not actually more deeply colonized in the sense that the religion was there, and everything was there, even if Christian Western countries were in charge. And didn't that actually give Muslim Africans this self-aggrandized perception that yes, we fought the British as Muslims, we fought the French as as Muslims, and look at you, Christian Nigerians, Christian Senegalese, look at us today. So I would like you to examine that, and finally, I am suggesting you take a look at all of this to see if you can have a theosophical approach to bringing together all the perceptions of the divine in just state. How can that be approached? Theosophical in the sense that it is the love of the divine and the love for the divine, whichever that divine happens to be, whether it's Muhammad here, Jesus there, or my divine in Jaws, traditional.
Sure.
Can we summon that perception of the divine as Africans rather than Christian Nigerians, Muslim Nigerians, and so on? Because I strongly believe, and I hope I'm not wrong, whatever we do, whichever religion we practice as Africans, perhaps we might not be aware of one thing. There is more of Christianization or Africanization of Islam and Christianity than there is Christianization or Islamicization of Africans. Because it doesn't matter. We are Africans at the bottom of it. So how can we utilize that?
Thank you. Thank you, Prof. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would add. The monetization.
Yes.
Because what has happened, you see, I was thinking of women and things like this. What happened is that the spread of colonialism, capitalism in Africa was a force which led to the dehumanization of women. You know, the family was a nice unit there, with everybody having a role to play. And then the capitalists came from Europe, and he set up enterprises, railways and things like this, and he hired African labor. He hired the men to go and work for pay. He introduced the capitalist pay into the African setting. So the male, who used to have very good relationships with the female, discovered something called the paycheck. So that there was something that he collected every week or every month, you see. So he that had power. This paycheck, he got it every Friday, and first he went to the shebeen and had a good drink, and son came home, you know, and put the paycheck or the dollars or whatever shillings, you know, on the table, and said, well, you deal with that, right? The woman lost her original ability to be arbiter of social and other relations in the situation. Well, my hypothesis is, is that as a part of this process, was something called the capitalism and the paycheck, but priests don't deal with capitalism.
I don't have any additional questions. Did you have something else or comments? Okay, I don't want us to run out of too much time, so I do want to give, though, because we have quite a large audience here, I'm assuming that some will also want to chime in. So maybe we have a few minutes to ask our audience members if they had any questions or comments.
I would just ask if you could comment in your presentation. I saw the reference to moral authority, and if you could comment on two aspects. Number one, you're pointing out the gap between religious ideals and realities of how they are in fact practiced. So that's one issue I'd like you, if you could speak to the importance of moral authority. And secondly, from the top down versus the bottom up. And in that case, in terms of leaders with moral authority and the importance of leadership on the local level, your observations. I know you have experience in Kaduna State with that. How faith practitioners on the local level can be transformative based on moral authority. So to demonstrate the ideal in practice and also to connect to more community-driven.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. I want to connect both the moral authority and the structure of the levels of peace building, and social cohesion. And I used the example of John Paul Lodrick again, his pyramid, where you have the top level, the middle, and the grassroots, that these levels are very important. It's not just coming down, as Prof pointed out, coming down from the top, oh, you have to do this. That becomes kind of imposition, legislation, order, command, but it has to be organic. And this is where the moral authority comes in, because a good example here is the work we do in Kaduna, Global Peace Foundation in Southern Kaduna, where we use the local religious leaders, local community leaders, women, youth, every segment of the society. And the balance is that moral authority which these religious leaders bring to the table, not in isolation as in do this, but we work on this together. It makes a whole lot of difference, and that moral authority is needed today, even in our families. In every unit, there is great need for moral authority. And why the moral authority of religious leaders is important is because of the position they occupy, the role they play at the very grassroots levels. Again, going back to the ubiquitous nature of religion, both the African traditional religion and the Christianity or whatever religion, there is that presence in communities. And this presence can offer a moral authority. That's how our project in Kaduna is seen as one of the best modeled by International Crisis Group. In the 2018 analysis and statistics, they showed that the Global Peace community value-based approach, that's what we do, community-based approach, peace building, has helped to de-escalate conflict in southern Kaduna. So that's the power of moral authority today. And you can move from the local community to the global stage. It is the same presence of moral authority. Jim, did that answer the question? Thank you. Oh, sister.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to say something. And I'm so happy to hear the professors give further idea about the role of women. When you are going to develop or publish your work, I want you to tap into a lot of things that the women religions are doing currently. Because a lot of women, both Catholic women organizations, have said we can no longer be at the back seat. We have to come forward to do something. Recently in Abuja, over 50 women religious got up and went to the the headquarters and sat down. They didn't open the door. They sat down there for 2-3 hours, and the government was able to open the door to hear them. So we can no longer sit at the back. So there are so many things that the women are doing, the women religious CWOs are doing in order to bring peace.
Thank
so
you.
when you tap into such to enrich your work.
Thank you, sister. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes.
First of all, this is the very first opportunity I've had to hear the defense of any dissertation on the doctoral level, so I'm very, very pleased to have been here, and I feel grateful to Father Candace for having invited me and for you being able to have us here. So this is a tremendous experience. One area that was referenced, I couldn't help but feel a part of both the question and what I believe is part of the answer, because of the same experience here in this country. And that was the one that referenced the colonialized, say, religious orientation that was ultimately placed on the African community, whether it be Catholic or Protestant. And the question that I was getting was how was that in a way just an orientation that the people would not necessarily embody within their own minds, within their own spirit. And I just, the same exact scenario existed, say here, related to African Americans during the enslavement time, adopting the religion of the master. The point, though, that I think that should be considered is that just as it was here, the African Americans incorporated what they believed or could see as the positive aspects of the religious orientation, the teaching of Jesus, let's say, and they incorporated it in their own Afro experience. And it actually became a different religion. It didn't become the experience even today. If you go into the African American church, you don't find the religion there of the master.
Yeah.
You find a different culturalized and historical experience that embodies both the heritage of the people as well as the teaching of a Christian moral authority that I think is being touched on by Father Candace related to his experience. So I just wanted to offer that as a third way.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Yes, thank you.
Okay, somebody at the back. Claire.
Yes, oh, sorry.
Just a quick ad about the women. So
Can't say
happy
too
to
much.
hear that. Thank you very
Can't say
much.
enough about that.
I think it was Dr. Kamara, or I can't remember exactly who was saying that maybe it was a little heavy on the aspiration side, and I think that there's a lot of, well, I don't know if you have to stick to JAWS, so maybe my idea doesn't count, but if you can go outside JAWS, there's some excellent, substantial examples of how women have impacted peace building. Not that far away, Liberia. You know, that was so powerful.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Kula.
By the way, I was in this room 20 years ago. Here was my defense in this room.
Oh, really?
20 years ago, yes.
Oh, wow!
Yes, so I was just wondering why you chose JAWS as your focus of study.
Okay, yeah, one of the major reasons, as I said, was my visit in JAWS in 2016, and considering the cultural, religious social setting of Jos, it's like a microcosm of Nigeria, where you have Jos South as the indigenous and the other people Jos North as the Hausa Fulani, just like Nigeria is divided that way. And then you have Christians, Muslims, traditionalists in Jos. So I thought this is one case study that can give us a picture of Nigeria.
I'd probably be the last person if I'm not sure. My name is Cosmas Wukafo. Father Kenneth is a parish priest in the church where we go at we attend at St. Matthias. And I was standing here December 3rd, 1992. Wow. Yes, where you are today. And I listened to my colleagues. I hear you. I had something really very, very important, and that actually hinges on change. Religion, Christian, Muslim, change. Peace, building, change. As a communication development expert I am in my area, I look at change as very, very important in all we do, in all we are asking. Looking at academia from the point of, the 1,000 years back, what we're doing today is actually working towards change as it actually embodies, the totality of humanity. Mine is not a question, but to address a concern that Father Kenneth has done a very, very excellent job. I didn't read the dissertation, but being very comported, he was able to hold himself and then present all these materials in a more friendlier manner, shows the element of professionalism that is expected of a future professor, as your committee members have actually designed today. And also, I praise you guys, all of you here, because I do come here every year as an external examiner, and I know what it takes to sit here and do what you all have done. This is an excellent exercise, and I commend all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Dr. Johnson?
Yes. Oh, I apologize.
I'm sorry. Mine is just to echo what other professors have said. Father Kenneth, I did a research that covered Jos in 1989. I looked at the political aspects of the problems in Jos, and today you're looking at the religious aspect of it. And I must state that you did a marvelous job. One of the things that I would like to comment on is the role the African traditional religion plays in the problems that we have in Jos. And I'm glad that you mentioned the Wangon Jos.
Yes.
Because you cannot take away the African traditional religious influence on both the Christian and Islamic
Muslims.
Problems
in
the area. Moreover, you cannot take away the role women who are predominantly farmers and who live towards the southern part of the area, how they respond. Some of these issues that we look at as religious issues are actually, economic issues, because the Hausa Fulani cattle rearers come in and their cattle destroy the farmlands of the women. And the women tend to resist that incursion. And when the men come out to defend their women, we label it religious
crisis.
Exactly. Okay? So when I did my work, my master's thesis on the political economy of industrialization in Plateau State, with case study of Jos, it kind of talked about most of the issues that you raised this afternoon, and I must say that you did a marvelous job.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we've reached the time where we can ask our candidate and also all guests if they would please leave the room. Our deliberations don't usually take very long, so we'll call you back in a few minutes, so don't go too far to hear the good news. Dennis, we wanted to congratulate you. Gosh, now how many titles do we put before your name? Father, Reverend Dr. Canis. Congratulations. We enjoyed reading your dissertation. Really think that you make an important contribution here. We as you saw from many of the comments, there's lots of things that we'd like to see in there. You only have 10 days, and we're appreciative that you might not be able to accomplish everything that we'd like to see in there, but your advisor has a full list that should keep you busy. I think the most urgent things, especially meeting with Ms. Goodwin, she'll talk about editing and kind of getting the document in the right proper formatting and shape and whatnot. But we want to congratulate you on a job well done. Oh, do we have any paperwork before any paperwork? Oh, he does?
Yeah,
before
I have
everybody
some
leaves?
refreshments, please.
Oh, okay, yes.
Yeah, please.
Okay, yes.
That's right. You are now a colleague. That's right.
Very nice. And thank you all for coming. It's very nice to have a nice group. Yes, I think there's some refreshments and things coming into the room. Oh, yes. I'm looking at you, Susie. That's what Cannister said.
That's right.
We certainly at least have the room until 4. Well, that doesn't give us very much time at all, does it? Because are they kicking us out of here? At 4, right?
At 4.
All right. That's in 5 minutes? Oh, okay, I didn't realize it.
Please, we can take some pictures with him. The committee members. Can you get them?
Okay.
Father Kennis. Father Kennis. Because this moment will never come again. Come and take pictures with your committee members.
It's on.
Professor Gregorian.
Please.
Dr. David, please.